Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Maria Show. It is June 27th, 2025. Well, if you happen to put on the news today, I think the top story is the Supreme Court rulings. It seems like President Trump is overjoyed, so much so he had an impromptu news conference, per se. He went into the press briefing room and took over from Caroline Leavitt, and it didn't stop. He just kept taking questions because he was so happy with the Supreme Court rulings today. One of them is Trump versus CASA Inc., which basically, in a 6-3 ruling, upheld what the Trump administration was saying, that district courts cannot override executive privilege and executive duties nationwide. This is really important because, as you saw, district judges were stopping deportation of illegal aliens who committed crimes or illegal aliens in general. And they were basically making a ruling for the entire country. Our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, came out and said out of the 43 out of, 60 injunctions, I may have the 60 number wrong, but certainly a good percentage of the injunctions came from district judges from, you guessed it, Maryland, DC, California, Massachusetts, all the far left radical, and I call them corrupt judicial services. Judges have overstepped their bounds repeatedly. Chuck Schumer said after the Democrats lost the presidential election, at least we have the courts. That was very telling. President Biden's administration appointed more district judges than any other branch, and surely they made sure they were radical left-wing judges. I think it was a dark day in our court systems, what we saw happen to the January 6th defendants, their constitutional rights violated. But the Supreme Court made it right. And Amy Barrett Cohen, who's been under a lot of criticism from conservatives, really came through and, saying that this was wrong. This took our country on a bad path. So at least that is finished. I'm sure, I don't know, it can't be appealed. It's the Supreme Court. So President Trump has vowed to restart deportations immediately. Another case, Mahmoud versus Taylor. In this came out of Maryland. I see this two ways. So this case was about parents having the ability to opt out of LGBTQ plus books being either read to their children or given to their children. So they won. The parents won. It's a good day in America for the parents. But what about the parents who aren't paying attention? Just like not every Democrat or Republican is bad or good because we're all individuals. Not every parent is good and has the best intentions for a child. Maybe they're not paying attention. I don't think these books should even be in the school system. Schools should not be talking about sexual orientation or political views. They should be teaching children how to read, how to write, exposing them to great works of literature, teaching them geography, about their own states and states' rights, just factual information, never mind any of this social re-engineering. So yay for the parents, one in Maryland. Another one, the Free Speech Coalition, Inc. versus Patton. The court again, 6-3, upheld Texas law. And, Paxton is Attorney General Ken Paxton. And Texas had a law that especially websites that had pornography or explicit material, they have to, instead of just saying, are you 18 years old? And anyone could say yes, they literally have to verify that somebody is 18 years old. So that was another good court ruling. And in Kennedy versus Braidwood Management, and I won't read all of them, you can look them up too. The court decided 6-3 that members of the U.S. Preventative Task Force Services, which set guidelines for free preventative health care under the ACA, are inferior offices. So what's that mean? That means their appointments are valid. You could take this as good as bad. It's just another ruling. So it's a very busy day. I think there were 6 rulings that came out today of the Supreme Court. So those were the biggest highlights of the day. But certainly what's happening down in Florida with Alligator Alcatraz. Have you heard of this? Governor DeSantis has a piece of property and he's making a detention center for ICE to help ICE out. Just watch this.
You don't need to invest that much in the perimeter. People get out, there's not much waiting for them other than alligators and pythons.
Florida has started construction on a migrant detention facility in the Everglades that Florida Attorney General James Othmeyer is calling Alligator Alcatraz.
Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide.
The site spans about 39 square miles and is a temporary repurposing of a landing and training airport facility between Miami and Naples. The construction started weeks after President Trump ordered federal agencies to reopen the original Alcatraz prison, which is known for being virtually inescapable. Operating the detention facility would cost the state approximately $450 million a year, according to a senior Department of Homeland Security official. Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava has expressed reservations about the facility.
It is an area that we have invested as a nation billions of dollars for protecting our natural environment, our water supply. It's an area that is under a federal oversight, part of our restoration plans for the Everglades.
Othmeyer said the federal government approved Florida's broader plan to have 5,000 detention center beds in place by early July across multiple facilities. The Everglades site will use light infrastructure like heavy-duty tents and trailers, and Othmeyer said it could be ready by the first week of July. The Florida Immigrant Coalition, a grassroots movement group, said this timeline is unrealistic.
You know, it's a unique area. It is surrounded by the Everglades, so there's not only alligators literally everywhere, there are pythons as well. And is this Governor DeSantis posturing himself for a presidential run? I don't know. I do commend Governor DeSantis. I think he's a great governor for Florida, and the people are lucky to have him. And certainly we do need ICE detention centers. President Trump has been a little frustrated that deportations and even arresting illegal aliens, especially those who have warrants out or have committed crimes, is he wants higher numbers. He wants up to 3,000 a week, and or maybe that's a month. But anyways, he wants more arrests, and we would have to house them somewhere. So Governor DeSantis is saying by first week of July, they'll be able to start housing ICE detainees. So it's a unique story. It is kind of like Alcatraz, right? Alcatraz, an island off of San Francisco, California, and thought of that you can't escape from Alcatraz. There has been very infamous escapes from Alcatraz, one not knowing if anybody even survived. The waters are so dangerous. But overall, if you look at our Bureau of Prison Statistics, there aren't a lot of successful escapes. Certainly communities suffer and panic when there are escapes because a lot of the people who do try to escape and get out into the communities until they're apprehended again are usually convicted of really heinous crimes, and they are probably going to be in prison for the rest of their lives. So they're desperate. So it is worrisome. So this is thought to be able to protect the communities if a detainee or detainees try to escape. So as I try to prepare for my show, I try to offer information that is important to you. It could be current news. It could be subjects that we need to dive just a little bit deeper than news highlights typically give you. And I have experts on to help explain situations. Well, I had a woman on my show, Tracy Slepsovich, who I thought was so compelling what she had to say. She had a son, or has a son, with autism, and she researched so much, and she has so much truth to say. This isn't just observation. She dives deep. And as a medical provider myself, and I would teach and I would lecture and I would mentor others, always listen to the patient and always listen to the family, because they watch the patient. They're around the patient usually 24/7. So it's invaluable information. Let's watch her again.
Hi, Dr. Maria. Thanks for having me.
I'm sorry, I got a little tongue-tied. It actually,
That's
your
okay.
name is said exactly how it's spelt. You also have a book, Tracy. Tell me about the book.
So my best-selling book is Warrior Mom, A Mother's Journey in Healing Her Son with Autism.
Yes, I want to learn more about it. I am a medical provider and I do know about autism, but there's nothing like a perspective from a parent. You actually observe things we don't observe. We see a patient in an exam room, and that's why I always teach younger providers, listen. If it's a young child, listen to the parents. If it's an adult, listen to that patient and their experience. We can literally get more out of talking and listening, especially listening, than we can from the physical exam. Would you mind telling us your story with your son?
You know, unfortunately, a lot of doctors these days, listening is not one of their strongest suits. So thank you for mentioning that. My journey began about 17 years ago when Noah was diagnosed with autism. But I did see him regress into a state of autism after his 1-year well baby visit, where he received his MMR and varicella vaccines. And, you know, my story is very similar to so many stories out there. There's thousands of parents that have the same story. You know, they watch their child, meet all their milestones and then go in for a routine well baby visit and watch the lights go out in their child slowly. Now, Noah did actually get measles from the vaccine, that go round. And I had no idea what it was, but I was told that it was a rash and that he would be fine. And he was having an allergic reaction to, one of the ingredients in the vaccine. So yeah, it was one of the ingredients. That's for sure. So the measles vaccine actually gave him the measles. So always remember that, you're not necessarily going to be immune from getting the virus itself by getting the vaccine. Many people get vaccine-induced viruses, including, measles, polio. Actually, since the 1970s, all the reported cases of polio in the United States have been vaccine-induced, which is really sad. But I'm a story of hope and inspiration. So I leave all that stuff behind me and I'm a solutions girl. And, the very same day that Noah was diagnosed, so it took me about 3 years, of being, tossed around the system and nobody giving me answers, to get real answers. And then a very dear friend of mine who was my naturopathic doctor at the time told me that Noah would be fine, that I needed to go home and do my research, that kids were making great strides with biomedical intervention. I had no idea what that was in 2008, but today I know nothing but in my life. And it's been quite the journey, and I feel very blessed. I believe along my road, God always sent me angels to guide me. And so I felt guided to assist other parents on their journey. Because as I was watching all this stuff unfold when COVID first came about, I said, oh no, here we go again. And I was worried, not just about the children, but about, people in general. And so I just sat down and I began to write. And I wrote my story. I wrote a little bit of a guidebook and the protocol that I followed back then. There's so much out there now versus when I started this journey. And so I wrote the basic protocol for autism back then and what I did to recover my child. But first and foremost, I got to tell you that I set a clear intention that day that my naturopathic doctor told me that Noah would be fine. And I was very clear that Noah would live a normal life without limitations, that he would be fine, and nothing was going to stand in my way. Unfortunately,
that's a great attitude.
Right? So I didn't let finances get in the way. I didn't let anything get in the way. I bartered for treatments. I negotiated. I was willing to scrub toilets, wash floors, whatever I had to do. I sold everything I owned. We even short sailed our house to take Noah to the Ukraine for stem cell therapy. And we just made it work. And the first thing, as I know you know, is addressing the gut. It is the number one thing. And it doesn't require a lot of money to address the gut. And before you even do any of these expensive treatments, that's where you should start, eating real food. So I took everything away.
Yeah, for my audience, Tracy, can you dive into that a little bit more? We in the industry, and you're really informed, we call it gut health. It's the microbiome of the intestinal. We have good and bad bacteria. But would you go into that a little bit more, exactly what you did?
Absolutely. It's your second brain. That's all I got to say. Well, next to your liver. But, your gut is connected to your brain via your nervous system. So when you have inflammation in the gut and your intestines, so on and so forth, it's going to affect the body. So a lot of these kids have what we call leaky gut, or an overload of yeast overgrowth in the gut or the gut lining. So when you have leaky gut, you have those little epithelial cells that line the intestinal lining, and it pulls in all the good stuff and it gets rid of all the bad stuff. So when you have genetically modified foods, mainly wheat and dairy and soy and corn and all those things that start to destroy the lining of the gut, what it does is it creates, it deadens those cells so they can't actually do their job properly. And I'm just trying to explain this in mommy terms. And it creates gaps. And what happens is, food particles leak into the gut and into the bloodstream, and they act as like opiates on the brain. So we have kids with self-injurious behavior. It doesn't hurt. They have high levels of pain. So it is like an opiate on the brain. But when you have yeast lining the gut, it inhibits the body's ability to absorb proteins and vitamins and nutrients and all the things that your body truly needs. So you find that these individuals, I'm not just going to say children, there's individuals out there that lack nutrients in their body. So you'll start to see like dark circles around the eyes. You'll start to see a distended belly if they're having, if they have food allergies and so on and so forth. And, they're sluggish, they have fatigue, they're not sleeping well. A lot of, if you see a child playing in their poop, a lot of it is gut issues. It's either yeast or it could be parasites. All those different things. So when we just start, by cleaning up the gut. And I mean eating real food. If you could pick it, pluck it, grow it, skin it, you can eat it. So it's very simple. If you go back to the old days where before we had processed food and everything else, imagine if we were the hunters and growers of the world, how we ate. So that is how we should be eating. And even wheat back then was, we milled it fresh. They made bread right away. Nothing was genetically modified back then, so we didn't have to worry about our bodies, not doing well with it. So there's all these different things, and then you have glyphosate and all kinds of other chemicals in the air. So there's a number of environmental factors that can mess up the gut microbiome. It's not just vaccinations. There's a number of things, and we could sit here and I could write a whole book on environmental factors. I haven't gotten there yet.
Tracy,
I decided to start an organization instead.
You must be very happy with some of the things that Robert Kennedy Jr. is trying to do, because he talks about processed foods and he's got that moniker, Make America Healthy Again. We have not been healthy in a very long time. And it is a lot to do with the processed food, but I was so happy you brought up genetically modified foods, because Europe for the longest time did not have gluten in their wheat. We have it because it's genetically modified. So it's a big issue, but it's something we can overcome. I want to jump back to the MMR, because I cannot tell you how many times I hear this from parents. It was after the MMR. I had a personal connection with one of my employees. I was CEO of a hospital. My director of surgical services had two beautiful little girls. Well, the younger one was due to get the MMR, had it. Oh my God, it was quickly. Within weeks, she just regressed, couldn't walk anymore, and it just got worse and worse. And this was northern New Hampshire. He tried everything he could in his power, and he ended up leaving the area to go to Texas, where they were working with stem cells and other things, which affected me, because I was like, it doesn't matter where a child lives. We should have the best health care for them. But this MMR is so consistent, and the industry has been unwilling to look at it with open eyes. It's like we, and I don't mean me personally, but we collectively in healthcare and the pharmaceutical companies, oh, no, there's no proof. But there's enough stories of this that we have to take an intellectual look at it. What are your thoughts? Are you, in the providers that you and your son have seen, are they doing any linkage at all to the MMR?
So, there's been many independent studies, and, Children's Health Defense has done many studies. So when you talk about Bobby Kennedy and anything he's tied to, he has done a fabulous job, and his team has done a fabulous job of uncovering a lot. But I don't want to just highlight MMR, because here's the issue. People think that it's just the MMR that triggers autism, and that is absolutely false. I'm here to tell you it is not the only vaccine that triggers autism. Children have died from Hep B. DTaP is one of the most dangerous vaccines out there. I'm going to sit here and just tell you that all of them are dangerous. All of them have neurotoxins in them. And when you give a 2-month-old, 4-month-old, 6-month-old baby an overload of vaccines, anywhere from 5 to 7 different vaccines all at once, then you have encephalitis, right? You have inflammation on the brain. And when does SIDS occur? SIDS occurs between 2 and 6 months. When do they receive the most vaccinations in their childhood vaccine schedule? Between 2 and 6 months. So God didn't screw up. He didn't say, don't lay your baby on their belly or their back or their side, or, whatever else they want to come up with to distract everyone from thinking that it's a vaccine that causes, or a group of vaccines that cause, SIDS. So it doesn't just cause autism, but I have so many parents, including my own nephew, who decided to vaccinate, but he's like, but I didn't do the MMR. I said, I told you you shouldn't do any of them, but that's just my personal opinion. Don't listen to me. And his son has autism. No, I didn't say I told you
Yeah,
so. I
I'm
promise
with
you.
you, Tracy. I actually don't see a need for any of them. And every state has a different schedule. So the CDC makes recommendations. I feel their recommendations are off, and they're just guided by the pharmaceutical companies. But every state can have different schedules. Michigan, I'm told, and I have not looked this up personally, has the most. They have on their schedule 50 different vaccinations, shots, and I don't get it. Like I'm so not into the COVID injection. I can't call it a vaccine. They had to actually change the definition of vaccine to fit COVID, but there was never any indication for it for children anyway. And I know a couple from New York who they wanted to give this injection in the hospital after the child was born. I don't even get the rationale to some of this. I don't mean to pour out my heart right now about it, but I have to seek to understand it. I don't even get the recommendations. I really don't. And I hope as providers, we're going to make a difference now in this new administration, because a lot of us have been concerned about this for a very long time, and we just couldn't get anywhere with changes. But tell me about your nonprofit organization.
So I wanted to educate parents. I didn't want to write another book because, marketing a book is a lot of money. It costs me more money to put my book out there. Not that I care about the money than I'll ever see come back, but that wasn't the purpose of it. So I started a Substack for any additional information. So I write articles on there. It's Warrior Mom, I don't know, some Warrior Mom. Anyways, so I write all my updated information on there, but then I'm like, we need a good conference. So Autism One, I had offered to assist them in getting, their nonprofit up and running again. And they were like, no, we're done. So I decided to start my own conference. I used to run conferences back in the day with my husband. So I had done it for many, many years. And so this was my niche. So I started the Autism Health Summit. Now, if you know anything about conferences, I'm here to tell you, no matter what you pay for the ticket, most likely conferences lose money. And so we lost a lot of money. And so I just wanted it to pay for itself because we provided a lot of scholarships for parents. And so I wanted to continue to provide those scholarships. So I started Autism Health. And it is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it is geared towards education. So we provide educational scholarships for parents, professionals, individuals, that are impacted by autism or other neurological disorders. And, we do the conference, we do webinars, we do small little events. We're going to be hosting our Autism Walk September 6th. It's either live at Huntington Beach Central Park, or you can do it virtually from anywhere in the world at any time. And there's some great prizes that we're going to be giving away. One is going to be like VIP tickets to the event or general admission tickets. We have some custom bats that are going to be signed by General Michael Flynn and hopefully Bobby Kennedy. I'm just waiting to hear back from him. And so I really would like everyone to just get out there. It's just a 3K walk because it is for children and families. We're going to have fun, games, vendors, anybody who would like to sponsor the event. So I really want this to be the next autism walk. I want it to be, worldwide, the autism walk. And my goal is to really put autism health on the map, not just as, like the organization, but what parents are telling me is you're the only organization out there that has no filters. Now, what people love about me is, one, I'm very loving and I'm very giving, but I am honest almost to a fault. So my son says, Mom, you're just on the spectrum too, because you have no filters. So maybe, who knows? I think we're all a little bit on the spectrum. I'm game. I
do like your style, Tracy, and I think that providers should go on your website into Autism Health to learn more, because like I said in the beginning, parents see things that we don't. And let's face it, you've probably done more research than most medical providers, whether they're a nurse practitioner or a doctor. You're in it to win it, and we can learn a lot from you. Do you also have an X account? How can people follow you on social media?
So I do have an X account. What is my X account? Let's. I swear I'm the worst social media. I know that my and it logged me out, but I know that my Instagram is like, so that we have Autism Health Inc. and we also have Autism Health Inc. on Facebook. I have Autism Author Mama, and more so my Substack, which is muy importante, is Autism Warrior Mom.
Autism
so my
Warrior
newest
Mom.
Yes. So anything on environmental toxins, updates on new therapies, treatments, all that stuff. I just find that it's better to just write an article versus you write a book and a year later it's outdated. Although I initially wrote my book because what I really wanted to do is just give families hope and really just tell my story, because during that time, my husband fights big insurance and they fight back. So my husband wound up on the front page of the LA Times in a smear campaign after he exposed big insurance, and the state of California insurance commissioner, who was Steve Poizner at the time, for fraud and collusion on smoke and ash claims in Northern California. And boom, they just gunned for my husband and they wrote a bogus article about him. So before any of this, COVID stuff and everybody winding up on the front page of the news, we had already been through it. We had lost my husband's business of 20 years. They tanked his reputation and his name. The very same year, my son was diagnosed with autism. And it was like a snowball effect. But I'll tell you, none of that stopped me. When my doctor was like, no, we'll be fine, I'm like, whatever I gotta do.
Swollen limbs, joint pain, inflammation, skin aging, and cognitive decline. These are just a few of the awful side effects that you can experience due to poor blood circulation. And popping ibuprofen is not a solution to the pain. It's only temporary relief, and it's only masking the true problem, which is inflammation. Researchers are saying to add this Antarctic super nutrient to your diet. I'm talking about omega-3 fatty acids. But not just any form of omegas. These particular omega-3 fatty acids are sourced from wild-caught krill. Has been shown to support healthy blood pressure, circulation, brain health, as well as reduce inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. For a limited time, you can grab Native Path Antarctic Krill Oil for up to 66% off plus free shipping. Just go to getkrill.com/Lindell right now to get your special offer.
Welcome back. It's been only 5 days since the United States bombed Fordow, Natas, and Isfahan in Iran. There's been a lot of controversy. How badly have we destroyed those nuclear sites? Is there a cover up going on? My own take is that we've done extensive damage. Is anything 100%? I don't know. Here to help me figure it out is Waleed Ferris. Welcome back to the show, Waleed.
Thank you so much for having me again in these historic moments.
Certainly. Waleed, what's your assessment on the damage done to the nuclear facilities?
That was the question of the last 4 days. I did my own assessment based on our sources here, on people who are in the know, who have worked in intelligence, who have worked also in the military, and of course sources within the opposition in Iran and in the region. So here's the deal. It's how you ask the question. If the question is about, did you clean up everything in that hole? Or there's still some material loose? That's not how you ask the question. The question is, did you break the backbone of the nuclear weapon that the regime was building? And the answer is absolutely. And I compare it to something in the medical field. What they have done in the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth and all those who were part of it, the chief of staff, is that they did a root canal. So here's the mountain. They dropped the bombs on the top and kept sending the other bombs until it went all the way to the bottom. Now, the critics are saying, yeah, but the mountain is still up. Really? To remove the mountain, you need a nuclear tactical bomb. That's not something that the president or this government in America wanted to do. Just a very precise surgical strike that went all the way down. And the proof is that there is no way to get to the bottom of it before at least a year of work, just to get to the bottom of it. And that gives me the certainty that the regime is not able, will not be able to rebuild the same place. I don't want to anticipate your questions, but yeah, there are risks that the regime, if they still stand, would build somewhere else or somebody else will help them. That's a different question.
Are you surprised that Khomeini is declaring a win?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, I was among those very few online to say, hey, the Khomeinist, that's Khamenei and his regime, cannot admit that they were defeated, that they lost the main weapon they wanted to build. But as important as the weapon, they also lost their air defenses. Remember, that would need months and months to be replaced. And we're not sure about what China and Russia, the main suppliers of the regime, are going to be doing. But in the psychology of anybody in that regime, they are backed by Allah. So it's impossible for them to lose. See, that's the trap of their own ideology. America is not stronger. Israel is not stronger than the divine. So that's how they explain it to their supporters. At the end of the day, because America, the powerful, was not able to defeat the regime completely, therefore we have won the war. That's their logic.
I see. Interesting. I thought, and I wasn't sure when it was recorded, whether he had the right information, but now I can see it's more in ideology, psychology almost, to tell the people that we are the victors. He afterwards, after the bombing, he started putting out word about a successor. Quickly, we've got to announce a successor. Who do you think that will be?
According to intel worldwide, according to our knowledge from inside the regime, there have been this vague type of choice of 2 to 3 potential successors. But now after this battle, I don't call it a war. People are calling it the 12-day war. It's the battle of the 12th day in a war that has been there since 1979 and has not ended. That's a footnote. Mujtaba is his son. And most likely he will be the main candidate to take over. He knows exactly everything about his father. And at this point in time, their instinct-driven decision-making process wants somebody who knows everything, somebody who is part of the machine, and it looks like it is his son.
Waleed, I'm not sure about all the particulars about the ceasefire. I'm very happy if it is sustained, and I'm happy for humanity if we can stop fighting. Do you know about any parameters? Will cease fire until whatever. Is there any parameters to this ceasefire?
I come from a different angle. I look at it from historical perspective, and I looked at it also from the perspective of geopolitics. This ceasefire, this regime, we've learned to deal with it since 1979. So it's not like yesterday or 5 years ago. It has been for decades. So this regime goes ceasefire to ceasefire. A ceasefire for the jihadists or the Khomeinists is in between two wars. So they do war, then ceasefire, regroup, reorganize, then another war. It's unlike, for example, Egypt. Egypt signed the Camp David Agreement, right? It was the first Arab country to do it. And then for decades, they may have not achieved a very warm, very integrative, like a ceasefire or peace. Actually, they signed peace. But like themselves and Jordan, they are in the process of integration of peace, worldwide peace. The Islamic regime in Iran is different. It's a Khomeinist regime. Any ceasefire they conclude basically is to regroup, reorganize, and address. And how do we know? Because people who are in the business of economics, people who are in the business of international relations, diplomatic, without having the knowledge of historians, won't understand. There are ideological goals. Those ideological goals are the cement of the entire regime. And this is, I'm going to say it probably for the first time that clearly, unless that regime comes to the front and say, I am reforming, I am not a jihadist anymore, I don't believe in the MMA and the caliphate, unless they say that, like Gorbachev tried to say and to do. We all remember the end of the Cold War. There were 3 years of reforms where Gorbachev said, okay, we have been communist Soviets, but now we're going to do perestroika. We're going to restructure. We're going to do glasnost. If we don't see this with the jihadists, should they be in Iran with the Khomeinis or with the other Salafists who are ruling some parts of the Middle East, including Afghanistan, we're not there yet. So we sit with them, and that is something that deserves a lot of debate in Washington. We need to know that we're sitting with jihadists. Anything we're going to sign on at the end of any session, we know that this is as good as they want. The other side wants.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail right on the head. President Trump said he was surprised that, I guess more than anything, Khomeini is not saying, Uncle, we're going to change, and that he still has some fighting words, at least in him. I wasn't that surprised either that they would come out in that posture. And what are our next steps? Oh, let me ask you this before we get there. How do we assess those sites? They're not going to let Americans in to assess those sites. Is there anybody we can rely on to legitimately assess those sites? Would Iran let anybody assess those nuclear sites?
That is going to be the big game. Now, the big game by the regime, we've seen it before. So we have PhDs in understanding the regime behavior. They're going to stretch it. They're going to say, let's have now a ceasefire, how to consolidate the ceasefire. These are my conditions. Looking at these sites is going to take some time. What is their real goal? Either 4 years until the end of the Trump administration, or 2 years until our next elections midterm, hoping that in the midterm, the president will lose the support of a majority in Congress. They know our system very well. They're extremely well informed and educated, and then they're going to start a different story, or they may rely on urban disturbances here in the United States. They have thousands and thousands of supporters of Hamas, of the Islamic regime, of Hezbollah. They have a panoply of tools they can use to push back against us controlling, the system of checking that you were talking about. But even though they would allow us to go in to look at these 3 sites, my guess is we can go and we can see that this was completed. They really don't care about that. What they would care about is to replace those sites that may need 2 to 3 years to be, rearranged or to get to the bottom of those big holes, the root canals I was talking about. But meanwhile, they're going to try to get from the Chinese or Russia or mostly North Korea different type, different rank, different weapons. They may not be as big, as large as the Khomeinists thought and hoped that they would have. Maybe there would be, tactical nukes, and we have to be very careful about that. The regime also, as you know, Maria, have money, have a lot of cash, and small tactical weapons could be used in the Middle East instead of those large ones. So we have to pay attention. Their goal now, let me conclude with this point and add one element I wanted to share with you. The regime's real enemy and fear is about their own people, is about to defend and protect the regime. That's what they're afraid. I mean, if you can add more money, that would be nice. But before money, should they survive is the bigger question. When the US did this huge strike and deprived them from the big card, which is the nukes, the nuclear project, which means they cannot go and negotiate, we can reduce the nukes. You don't have nukes. What are you going to negotiate about? The second thing that caught my attention was 24 hours after the American strike, there was 1 or 2 strikes by the Israelis who started to target the militia that is deployed in the city in the protection of the regime, the Basij militia, which is the weakest one, but the one that actually stops the population from moving. The minute they did it, the regime ran to Qatar and told them, please, not that way, but equivalent of please, let President Trump know that we are ready to come and negotiate. They moved not just after the loss of the nuclear, they moved when they feared that a disbanding or a strike against the lower militia would allow the population to come and perform maybe resistance, opposition. That is where they are right now. They're going to protect the regime, and they may, Maria, go and then take revenge against the population in the next weeks or months.
That is incredible information, Waleed. Really incredible. I've been impressed with the Iranian people through the years. They know when they protest, they're at great risk. Some people still went out to protest, arrested, tortured, unfortunately, some even murdered, but they kept coming out in droves. They are a people who really desire and want freedom, civil liberties. They were always this wonderful, great, fulfilling Persian culture that was very much aligned with Western culture. But I worry how, I always like it when things are organic and it comes from the people. But we have to admit the Revolutionary Guard has weapons and the people do not, unless they can somehow obtain them illegally. But I do wish them the best. I pray for the people of Iran every single night. And but you told us something very important about the IDF going after, you called it Basij? Basij,
B-A-S-J, Basij. Yeah, you could go online. You have a lot of information. The upper one, Doctor, is called the IRGC. We have discussed this very much. The Sepa Pasdaran. They have a lower layer. These are the popular militia, not heavily weaponized. So they don't have like long-range missiles. They only have AK-47s and B-7, enough to make arrests, enough to kill people, enough to stop any demonstration. The weakest of that militia is the real reason for why the Iranians are not successful in completing a revolution, because they are armed, the militia are armed, and the population is not. You have a great point here that could be discussed in the future.
Yeah. Well, I thank you. I know your time is very precious, but thank you, Waleed. Everybody leans on you to know what's happening in the Middle East, and especially with Iran. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And we lean on you to take our voice and make it public as far as you can. Thank you so much for your service and education for America.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ever since June 22nd, we've been talking about Iran and what's going to happen in their future. One of my frequent guests is a gentleman named Ali Reza Jeffers Day. And I always make fun of my own self, the way I struggle with pronunciation of some Middle Eastern names. But he is associated with a group. We call them dissidents. They were either people who grew up in Iran or escaped Iran when they were children because their parents were being tortured, so took them to either America or Canada. And I met a group of dissidents who ran from Iran, and they were first housed in Iraq at what was called Camp Liberty. So the United States government helped them reposition there in Camp Liberty, and Iraq was helping. But then Iran got into an unholy alliance with Iraq, and they started bombing these poor, innocent men, women, and children in Camp Liberty. And so the United States government again decided to protect these dissidents, and they are now moved to Albania in Tirana. There's about 3,000 of them, and the leader of the group, believe it or not, is a woman, Maryam Rajavi. I am blessed to have spoken to Maryam multiple times. She has this 10-point plan where if you just go back to, I think it was my last show, Ali Reza goes through that 10-point plan. If you closed your eyes, you would say, oh, he's talking about what we want here in America, what our Constitution gives us for liberties here in America, although a lot of us say our liberties came from the good Lord above. So she would be aligned. The thing I like the best about Mrs. Rajavi, if it's, to take her at face value, right? She says she does not want America to help with a regime change. She does not. She does want it to come from the people. She's been preparing different government agencies in her dissident group to keep Iran moving forward until they have an election. And if the people say, wow, you did a great job stabilizing the country, I would like you to continue, so be it. I like that a lot. That does speak to me. Can I ever say that somebody is telling the God's honest truth? I guess I can't. And I too don't want to tell the Iranian people who or who shouldn't run their country. I want them to vote. I want them to be a little bit more like America because I want that for them. I feel they deserve it. I feel any country deserves that. But I think we should take a good look at Rajavi and her group. Now, the regime, meaning Khomeini, the mullahs, they've done a great job of trying to discredit this group. Why? Because they feel threatened. They put pressure not only on Edi Rama, the prime minister of Albania, to do things like turn off their internet, which has been turned off for a very long time now. They actually put pressure on our State Department. You may look up MEK, and you may see that President Clinton at one time put them down as a terrorist group. There was never any evidence about that. It was Iran influencing President Clinton to do that. And you'll never believe who changed it. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. She realized there was no proof to any of it and took them off the terrorist list. But there's been a lot of discrediting going on in propaganda against this group. And to me, if you work that hard to discredit 3,000 people, a lot of women, right? It's headed by a woman, Maryam Rajavi, in charge of her little government groups, infrastructure, finance, women. So it's a very interesting model. And can you imagine if the interim president of Iran was a woman, how that would shake up the Middle East? Now, I'll tell you something. If you look her up, she wears a hijab. So a lot of people criticize that. Why would we want somebody who wears a hijab? She will address that straight on in saying, but I don't tell you you have to wear one. I like to wear one. It was part of my culture growing up. Doesn't mean anything to anybody but, her, what she wants, but she would never force it on to anybody. But she is absolutely about women's rights. And I was very lucky to speak at a conference about women's rights and what happens in a misogynistic country like the current Iran. Well, we need to just keep watching, and time will tell. And again, God bless the people of Iran. God bless the people of Israel. God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Have a pleasant weekend, and I will see you on Monday.